Wait.
It's fine. I was hitting the wrong thing.
I went live because I thought they were back.
Yeah, I think we're, I mean, that's fine because they're on and it's only 4 minutes away. So we're pretty good. I think we're also live right now. People are listening to us too. What's up, fams?
We back, fam.
We're back. The task force meeting is going to start in 4 minutes. So they're just getting started. So hang out, sit back, relax, buckle up your seatbelt, and get ready for public comment at 3:30. See you guys in the chat on YouTube and on Facebook. Like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. California Reparations now.
Hit the bell.
We will be starting at 1:30, so we will be starting promptly in 2 minutes at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Good afternoon. My name is Camila Moore, and I am the chairperson of the Reparations Task Force. Before we begin the second part of our meeting, let's have the staff do a roll call for attendance and establishing whether we have quorum. I will now cue Parliamentarian Johnson, who will then cue Ms. Belton for the roll call vote. The roll call.
Thank you, Chair Moore. We will do a roll call and ask that every task force member indicate their presence, beginning with you, Chair Moore.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dr. Brown?
Present.
Thank you. Senator Stephen Bradford? Dr. Cheryl Grills?
Present.
Thank you. Lisa Holder?
Present.
Thank you. Assemblymember Joan Sawyer?
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Javon Scott-Lewis?
Present.
Thank you. Don Tamaki? Thank you. Councilmember Monica Montgomery Stepp?
Here.
Thank you. Madam Chair, there are 9 task force members, and the number needed for a quorum is 5. The number currently present is 8. Madam Chair, a quorum has been reestablished for the latter half of today's meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Belton. So task force members and members of the public, I hope you all had a great break. We will now move to agenda item 7. Agenda item 7 is a discussion and the adoption of a public hearing schedule. In developing the format and schedule, we need to consider the limitations identified and decide how we want to proceed with scheduling and formatting the meetings. In adopting the schedule, we must decide whether we want a 1-day or 2-day hearings. We may have some topics be 1-day hearings and others be 2-day hearings. And we also need to decide the topics of each day of the hearing so that staff can implement our direction. California DOJ has put on the board, on the screen at this present moment, the topics proposed by the task force at our June 1st meeting. It was a conversation, a great conversation facilitated by Member Holder, where we came together collectively to brainstorm topics that we identified might have been missing in the proposed public hearing schedule that the California DOJ proposed at our June 1 meeting. So that's the first table. Next to that table, the California Department of Justice did us a favor in delineating the different sections that will be in the written report, and they put in bold the sections that absolutely must be in the report. Right, and then to the right of that table, you will see the proposal that the California Department of Justice proposed at the June 1 meeting. But as a reminder, we did reject that proposal, and so part of our task today to come up with a new public hearing schedule proposal. Right, so that's a huge task, right? And so I came up with a presentation for a proposal for what our public hearing calendar could look like. And I would be more than happy to share that proposal with you all. But before I do that, I want to give the rest of the members an opportunity if any member has come up with a presentation or has any ideas for what our public hearing proposal should be for the rest of this process. I would love to hear it now. We will continue to hear it throughout this session. But again, I have a presentation that I'm more than willing to share my screen and show you what I have. But before I do that, I wanted to open the floor and recognize any members if they wanted to make any comments about where we are right now.
I'd like to make a comment. I think
Okay,
thank you. I think it would weigh in on how we're thinking about this, and that is this notion about 10 meetings. So I went back and I read AB 3121, and in section Article 3 under membership, it's 8301.2 and section I and J. It seems that according to these stipulations, the number of meetings is associated with the cost of per diem reimbursement. And if that be the case, we are meeting virtual. There are two issues. We are meeting virtually, so there's no per diem expense associated with our first meeting or our second meeting, which, if I'm my logic is correct, just on the basis of that, we could extend our number of meetings to 12. But that being said, it's the issue of per diem compensation and reimbursement that is designating 10 meetings. But if we wanted to meet more, I believe that we can, sans or without reimbursement for travel expenses. And I would like for us to consider that we are not limited to 10 meetings. We have a lot of topics, and I don't know if we would end up doing just an injustice to the depth that we might need to go in or to have the breadth of coverage of topics by limiting it to 10. And the statute, the bill rather, does not say we can't go over 10. It's just saying that we can't be compensated for per diem for more than 10. So correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, if there's a different interpretation of that.
Thank you.
I've been submitting since day one, we can have more meetings. And if you remember, I asked, was the meeting schedule based on per diem and money? Staff said no. Staff was wrong. It was based on money. Also, it was based on, I would almost say, pre-pandemic, when we were used to just, coming together at a place. Well, what the pandemic has shown us, we can meet virtually. It was almost unheard of. So I think when this was originally written, it was based on how do you get all these members from different parts of the state together. And now we can do it virtually for free. As far as cost, the only other cost I would think would be the cost of staff, which hopefully is embedded in their daily work, so we can have more. What I would suggest is let's do our basic schedule. And if we have to do, let's just say we wanted to break out in subcommittees, or if we had a discussion and it went extremely long and we wanted to come back again, agreement, all of us, that we have that flexibility to be able to come back and discuss something a little more with 3-day notice or whatever. And that we just don't limit ourselves to 10, and that we expand that number as needed. But my interpretation is the same as the member stated personally. And I'm also having our legal counsel in the Assembly, and I think the legal counsel in the Senate said we could have more, but we would not get per diem. And also when you look at it, it talks about per diem for elected officials. We get per diem no matter what. So I do believe this was based on whether or not you'll get paid for showing up at these meetings. And I believe Mr. Bradford and I don't want to spend his money, but if it meant not getting per diem that day, I think he would agree with me also that, like the other members, we wouldn't get per diem either.
Thank you for that, Dr. Grills and Assemblymember Jones Sawyer. At this time, I would like to direct questioning to CU and Gang. Can you provide the legal opinion that the Department of Justice has regarding this issue, if possible, if you all have it at all at this moment?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Moore. So yes, to the extent per our implementing statute AB 3121, the task force may have additional meetings, but that members will not be reimbursed for it. So just to clarify, the per diem is not a per diem for serving on the task force, right? The per diem is for reimbursements, meals, provisions, travel expenses, and so on. And so the task force may have additional meetings, but members will not be reimbursed for it, but that there may be additional costs involved in addition to member reimbursement for travel costs. So the reason that we are meeting virtually today is due to an executive order from the governor that is still in place due to the pandemic. Once that executive order is lifted, and our understanding is that there will be some lead time before that, when we're notified before that lifting comes into effect. But once that executive order is lifted, we will no longer be able to hold virtual meetings. We will have to go back to holding in-person meetings as all state agencies are required to do before the pandemic. And so to the extent that there may be additional costs to the meeting, we might need to account for that in our planning in location and meeting structure. And that will be in future strategy discussions with chair and vice chair once the lifting of the virtual meeting executive order takes place. Should the task force require more meetings, we would request that the task force give us specific direction as to the topic of each additional day of meeting so that we have a plan moving forward and can begin logistical planning. In addition, I think this was previously discussed when we were talking about, when the task force was talking about community engagement, the listening sessions where there are no task force decisions being made and where two task force members are sitting and receiving public comments from the community do not count against these 10 meetings. And so these 10 meetings would serve a different function than those listening sessions.
Okay, so to reiterate, listening to the feedback from Dr. Grills, Assemblymember Jones Sawyer, and CUN, I think a reasonable interpretation is that the task force is able to have an unlimited amount of meetings so long as we're not being reimbursed for more than 10 of those meetings. Also, right, in terms of the listening sessions, those wouldn't be considered formal public hearing meetings because not all members would be able to be present. So I just wanted to return back to the interpretation of section 8301, A, I, and J. As chair, you know, and hearing what CUN just stated and hearing the comments from Dr. Grillo and Assemblymember Jones Sawyer, I believe that is the interpretation that we can have as a task force, as many meetings as we can in order to fulfill the purpose of this task force, but we just will not be able to be reimbursed for more than 10 of those meetings.
That's very clear, Madam Chair. I have a practical matter. Are we having visual on this call now? Because my equipment.
We can't see you. Can you?
No.
We cannot see you. Can you get someone to assist you to turn your video camera on?
We are working on turning Vice Chair Dr. Brown's camera on.
Yes, we are. Dr. Brown, Ms. Chestnut, I believe, is on her way to the church to assist you.
No, I'm not at the church. I'm at another site.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I had visual on before, so there's no need for her to assist me. It's a matter that's not coming on. It's just audio.
If next to the microphone button, there should be an icon that looks like a video camera. It might be turned on for you.
I know about all that, but that camera
Still
is not.
Okay, so let's just return back to business while those technical difficulties are being adjusted. So again, I just wanted to reiterate and get confirmation from CUN that I think that's what we're hearing, that we're able to have, in theory, an unlimited amount of meetings necessary to achieve the purpose of this task force. with the caveat that we would not be able to be reimbursed for more than 10 of those meetings. Is that correct?
I would also like to clarify that there may be additional costs to the meeting that we would have to account for in our planning moving forward as well. That there be specific direction to us on each day of the meetings that are being planned as to how to plan them.
And may I also ask that you include the savings from this meeting and the previous meeting that you had for not having in-person meetings where all of us come together. So you now have, from my interpretation, based on what you said, we actually have savings on meetings.
Yes, thank you so much for that point. We will certainly work with our accounting department to figure something out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Yang. Let's move forward. Again, we're discussing agenda action item number 7. Dr. Grills posed a question about the amount of meetings we have left. And Assembly Member Joan Sawyer kind of built on that question, and we gained some clarity from the California Department of Justice. So I think we're good on that front. Now, I guess in the interest of time, I would like to share my proposal for what our potential public hearing calendar could look like. So at this moment, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen? I can't see anyone, so I need some feedback to see if anyone can. Okay, great, thank you. I will maximize this. You just see the proposal, nothing else, right? You just see the blue slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is just a quick proposal that I came up with for our public hearing schedule. So again, this is our task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. So a quick overview of the proposal. So presently, before we had this discussion, right, we were under the common understanding that there were 8 public hearings left in this calendar, but that may be increased given this discussion that we just had. In terms of my proposal, I'm suggesting that all future public hearings are changed from 1 day to 2 days. And that could also help in terms of not having to set aside just one full day for a meeting, but I'll get to that later. So again, presently there are 8 public hearings left in the calendar, but as we know, that may be increased. All future public hearings I'm proposing are changed from 1 day to 2 days. In my proposal, I state that at least 5 hearings should be dedicated to information gathering and gaining that corpus of evidence that we need to develop robust proposals and a robust written report. And then at least 4 hearings are dedicated to developing and presenting reparation proposals under international law standards. Just as a quick reminder, there are 5 forms of reparations under international law, which are compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. All public hearings, as a reminder, will include expert and public testimony in addition to public comment. And again, this proposal for the public hearing schedule is intended to complement and bolster community engagement. Next, in terms of the proposal overview, and I think this gets to Dr. Brown's comments, I'm suggesting that along with our public hearing schedule, for each public hearing, the task force will put out a call for requests for proposals or ROPs from stakeholders, from a diverse community of stakeholders before each public hearing. So for instance, meeting 5 may be on infrastructure or homelessness. Before meeting 5 commences, we will put out a call with a sufficient amount of time to diverse stakeholders to submit to the task force requests for proposals or policy proposals on the topics at hand. So on infrastructure and homelessness. And so those requests for proposals will look like, typical ROPs, a full-fledged plan, a proposal, a cost analysis, an implementation plan, and an explanation on how those ROPs fit into the categories of reparations and repair for Black or African Americans. Also, this addresses some of the public comment and feedback from community groups, in that there was a concern that if we continue to, go along each meeting and just collect the evidence and waiting to consider the proposals towards the end, that might do us more harm than good. And so kind of injecting this idea of putting out a call for requests for proposals before each public hearing, we're engaging the community and diverse stakeholders throughout the process on the development of proposals early on, and we're not waiting towards the end. And I would love to hear your questions or comments about that. And I can explain later. But again, the last point, I think at each public hearing we need to set aside some time to acknowledge and briefly discuss the previously submitted ROPs that come in. So again, for instance, if meeting 5 is, on infrastructure or homelessness, there will be some weeks before meeting 5, several weeks before meeting 5, for diverse stakeholders to come up with their own reparations proposals. They will submit that to the task force, and then we will set aside time in that hearing to acknowledge and briefly discuss it. And then towards the end, we'll have a collection of ROPs that can help us in our job in terms of developing the final proposals. So now I will move to my suggested ideas for the public hearing meetings. Again, this is the caveat. Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Sorry.
Before you go further, let me say this, please. For example, you mentioned homelessness 3 times. Is not homelessness basically, fundamentally, a symptom? And when we're talking about reparations, the basic thing is we're out of a house because of a lack of fair access to quality education and training, up at the top of the list. Number 2, economic empowerment, or in tandem with that, health. But what is where Brother Vice Chair is saying, we got to put this thing down to bite sizes. But we're all over the creation and talking about reparations. We'll end up spreading this task too thin. And we and the public will be overwhelmed. Are we going to deal with the basic, fundamental human needs?
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I am almost done with my presentation. I would just ask to reserve any comments or questions towards the end. Thank you. Okay. So moving forward, my topic proposal for meeting 3. And again, before I move on, I did my best in terms of coming up with a calendar to still keep many of the ideas implemented by all of the ideas actually, proposed by the California Department of Justice. And I also tried to implement some ideas from public comment and public feedback that we received via email. So the calendar that I'm about to show you is a combination of ideas from all of those different groups, as well as my own ideas. So for meeting 3, September, and the same dates, they're the same dates as proposed by the California Department of Justice. So meeting 3, September 2021 topic could be on the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery, and the impetus and implications of the Great Migration. So day 1 could cover topics related to the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery. And I think it's important to even have an expert testimony that could give us a primer on like the national reparations efforts and the international law framework that could then guide us for the rest of this process. And then day 2 will cover the following topics: the impetus and implications of the Great Migration. So that would include a discussion on the lack of political inclusion of Black Americans in this country, in this state, economic disempowerment, convict leasing, Black codes, and other forms of racial terror. And just to remind members of the public, each hearing we will have expert testimony, public testimony, and public comment. So for instance, for meeting 3, day 1 and day 2, we will have expert testimony, public testimony, and public comment for each day. And so for instance, day 2, in terms of public testimony, just to give a quick example, if there's an elder, you know, I'm sure I have people in my family who were a part of the Great Migrations. They could say out of their own mouths, what was the impetus behind why you came to California? What are the things you faced that you didn't think you would face in this quote unquote free state, right? Okay, so meeting 4, October 21 topic could be on segregation, discriminatory policies in public and private life. So the first day, we would talk about education, housing, and environmental justice, right? That's an idea that's been retained by the California Department of Justice. And then day 2, we will cover segregation and discriminatory policies as it relates to the racial wealth gap, banking, and labor. So that would include a conversation on Black farmers and the military, you know, the disproportionate application of the GI Bill, things like that. Meeting 5, December 2021, the topic, first day would be on infrastructure, gentrification, and homelessness, and a larger discussion about public health. And then the second day, we would have a discussion on entertainment, sports, arts, and culture, where we might get into a discussion about the history of racism and anti-Black discrimination, entertainment, arts, and the sports industries, and discuss the current barriers for Black and African Americans in these respective industries. Meeting 6, mid-February 2022, topic, first day, we can talk about the history of policing and the war on drugs and its consequences on Black communities in California. Day 2, we can talk about the criminal legal system, where we can really delve deep into, you know, the state of jails and prisons, and anti-Black bias as well, in relations to hate crimes, which I made a comment about in the introduction of this meeting today. Meeting 7, mid-March 2022, addressing various legal considerations and exploring reparation in the form of compensation. So I was thinking day 1, we could cover the following topics: who is eligible for reparations, right? Maybe we can talk about the 13th Amendment and issues around constitutional law, the limits of Proposition 209, and scales of culpability in terms of private actors, you know, as this is something that Javon Scott Lewis raised in our last meeting in terms of scales of culpability. Not only will we be considering, you know, this on the state and national level in terms of culpability, but even private actors, corporations, universities, things like that. And day 2, we'll really be digging deep into the forms of reparations in international law under this proposal. So for day 2, we will cover topics around the international legal justification, the different forms of reparations. We'll have expert testimony possibly come in to give examples of other forms of reparations and precedents in this country and even internationally. And then we can delve really deep into the reparation schema, starting first with compensation formula. So there are experts out there who have already done this work. You have Professor Thomas Kramer from the University of Connecticut. You have Dr. Darity and his partner, A. Kirsten Mullen, who have come up with their own compensation formulas for reparations. I think you even have Bob Johnson, who was once the founder of BET. Well, he is a founder of BET. He has worked with business leaders to come up with compensation formulas as well. So that could potentially look like engaging them to come and speak, and so we can hear from them about what these compensation formulas could look like. Then meeting 8, September 2022, topic, exploring reparation in the forms of restitution and rehabilitation. Again, so day 1 would be just dedicated to restitution. Hearing public testimony, expert testimony, and public comment as to what reparations in the form of restitution could look like. And then day 2 is completely dedicated to reparations in the form of rehabilitation. There'll be a full day of exploring what reparations could look like in that form, in the form of rehabilitation. So that could look like, discussing mental health, psychological harm, things like that. And then meeting 9, November 2022, exploring reparations in the form of satisfaction and guarantees of non-repetition. So day 1, we would be talking about guarantees of non-repetition. That's the last form of reparations under international law. So we will be contemplating, what does the public apology from the state of California look like? What are some other symbolic forms of reparations? Let's talk about commemorations and tributes, consideration of educational materials that will go out to California about what we're doing, things like that. And then day 2, we can have a full day of considering the ROPs that were submitted throughout this process, and some of the things that we considered in these public hearings. And then finally, the last meeting could be a presentation of the proposals and our approval of the second report. So remember, going back to the beginning, there are technically 8 public hearings left in the calendar, but again, given the discussion that we just had, that may be increased. But I did plan my proposal based on the confines of that. I thought we would only have 8 meetings left. So that's why I started at meeting 3 and it ends at meeting 10. I will stop at this moment. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and I will welcome any comments or thoughts or questions that you may have.
Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Brown, you are recognized.
There's one area that was not covered, and that is discrimination in immigration. And that's why I'm talking about contextually in California. That's why our existence since 1858 has been problematic in the state. The United Nations Commission on Refugees, you will discover, has not been fair, just, and equitable in its deliberations as regards determining who gets into this nation. What does the body think about the oughtness and the rightness of including that?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that very much. In the event that this proposal is even adopted, I would hope that, if there is a motion for it to be adopted, that the motion would include this being amenable, that this can be amended at any time to include some of the topics that I might have missed. So thank you for that. Are there any questions in regards to the structure? I tried to keep the same structure as outlined as the DOJ, but is there any concerns about the timeline, about the substantive topics, about the 2-day hearings? Really curious to hear your thoughts.
My only additional one would be focus time on the task. In other words, we will give quality treatment. I go back to my fundamental question, what is very basic in terms of our getting a footing as a people toward reparations and restoration and improving the quality of our life? What is fundamental and basic that you can spend a rifle approach and not a shotgun approach, but a rifle approach in those major areas that go for the making of quality of life and success? How have the other folks succeeded who've been under the gun in terms of being oppressed? Definitely you find certain communities, education at the top, training. Number two, they know how to deal with that money too. Economic empowerment.
Sorry, Vice Chair Brown, I'm getting a note. Can you please identify yourself? I think you just commented without, saying Vice Chair. I'm getting a note. Could you please identify yourself?
This is Amos Brown speaking.
Thank you. Okay, so let's take a step back. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Gross.
I haven't finished. Education, economic empowerment, health, getting more doctors, getting more medical professionals, housing, where we've been discriminated, and finally, having a sense of belonging and community amongst ourselves, as other groups have done. Our watering holes that have been destroyed, not by ancient public policy, but by public policies, they say in Mississippi, yesterday, that's right up on us in terms of these quota systems, the lottery for housing, restricted covenants. That's why we have been dumped out of our communities. So, for what it's worth, I still contend personally, these are the basic, fundamental, foundational lifeblood issues.
Dr. Grills, did you have a comment or question?
So the reason I was quiet earlier was because I was trying to synthesize all of this in my head, and I couldn't hold all of the different pieces. So on the one hand, what we have is this list comparing what we proposed on June 1st and what the DOJ staff have proposed, or sections of the written report. And then Exhibit B, we have this list of the actual topics. And Exhibit C, I couldn't keep in my head, which is your set of meeting topics. And so what I was trying to do was to see, were we being, with what was being proposed, is everything being covered? So at least from the list of topics on the DOJ template, it looks like most of the things that are necessary for the written report are covered, and then some. Thank you. So what I was trying to see is, how what you're proposing is different from the meeting schedule and how that overlays on the topics that we proposed as well as DOJ. So we got the criminal justice. Oh, I couldn't do it that fast, but nonetheless, that's my struggle. It's not anything to do with the merits of what you said as much as,
Right.
yeah, I'm trying to see, are we checking off all of the boxes? And is it, both accomplishing what DOJ needs to make sure is incorporated in the report, coupled with the topics that we feel are important to cover? And maybe someone else has got it organized in their head and they can help bring me out of the fog.
If it would be helpful to put up my screen again so that we can kind of go do a checklist, start at Exhibit A, then Exhibit B, then Exhibit C, that would be fine with me. Is that something that we would want to do? Or
If I could jump in here, this is Lisa Holder. Yeah, I'm having the same sort of conceptual struggle in terms of organizing information that Dr. Grills is having. It's a tremendous amount of information that we need to analyze and synthesize. And I think one of the most important things that we undertake is the themes. And so we can't do it in a way that is haphazard at all. It needs to be systematic and it needs to involve all of our input. So I'm trying to figure out a way to conduct this analysis in a way that is systematic and that takes into account all of our input as to how we prioritize the themes. And I know that the DOJ has their set of priorities and we're under the gun because they want us all wrapped up in a nice package today so that they can start setting up the meetings. I honestly don't know if that is a realistic expectation, given how important this particular aspect of our work is. We may need a little bit more time. So, if we were in a room right now, we could get out the whiteboard, and start to everyone just list out everything that they think is really important. I don't know if we have that capacity with this technology, but, sort of the that I'm used to, like attorneys in a war room figuring out what is your trial strategy and really just breaking it down and taking input from everyone. If there is a way to conduct that process over Zoom today, I think we should take some of the time allotted for this subject to do that. But that's my struggle right now.
Member Holder, in recognizing the limitations of this technology, I totally understand. And I would be open to your suggestion as well, just putting that out there. But I did try to do my best in terms of due diligence to incorporate the ideas that we discussed from our last meeting, as well as the ideas of the California DOJ's proposal that was rejected by the staff, as well as comments from the public. So the proposal that I just presented is an amalgamation or combination of all those three different stakeholders, so to speak. But does anyone agree with Member Holder and kind of wants to continue with that line of thought? I think I might have saw Member Scott Lewis or no, I thought I saw his hand, sorry. But does anyone share kind of similar concerns with Member Holder, particularly with her suggestion of kind of, I think you said, Member Holder, maybe even reconvening later today? Is that what I heard you say? To kind of go through the analysis of what should be included in the public hearing calendar. Is that what I heard?
Well, I said using the time allotted today to actually put our ideas on paper in a more systematic and inclusive way. I don't know how much time is allotted for this right now, how much time we've already used up.
You
Yeah,
have
an hour. I mean, I think this is a roll up your sleeve moment. Can the DOJ assist us right now and put a whiteboard up so that we can all start to put down some of our thoughts on critical themes that need to be prioritized?
Hi, this is Siyun from the DOJ. Trini or Curtis, if you are on, do you have any idea whether or not that's possible? I guess I've been talking. Actually, while I'm talking, I realized what I could do is share a screen with a blank Word document and type as everybody starts talking, and we can see how that works.
That was going to be my suggestion. There is no whiteboard function in Blue Jeans.
Well, the other option is to do a Google Doc that we can all in real time just type our own things into. So if someone created a Google Doc that had perhaps 3 columns, the first column is the existing meeting meeting topics, 3 through 10 laid out by DOJ. The second column has the topics proposed by the task force on June 1st, along with the column that has the topics for the written report. And then the last column would have what is Chairperson Moore's layout. And then we can see, and we can see things clearly, and then we can add in things or type in things in real time. It might go a little faster than having one person trying to type everything, but it does require someone to quickly set up a Google Doc. We could table this discussion while someone sets that Google Doc up, and then come back to it and move on to another agenda item.
I'm sorry, I had to take a quick call, so we were just doing the schedule. Why is it so complicated? So what, can I ask what happened? It seemed pretty simplistic. What's going on? I just need an update, please.
Well, yeah. Well, Member Holder can go ahead. Member Holder.
Yeah, we're doing a schedule, but we're trying to decide on the critical content of the schedule. So what will each of our sessions entail in terms of the expert witness testimony that we're going to get, right? So this question that I'm struggling with, maybe no one else is the content of information that we are going to be curating during this process, and making sure that
my presentation, you don't like what was laid out, or you just want more? Because we can always add more. So
no,
do you want to take stuff out? If you're fine with it as it is, then and if you want to add, we just add to it. So that's why I'm a little. I apologize.
I just can't hold all the information in my head. It's sort of what, I mean, we this is the first time I'm seeing that PowerPoint. I can't hold all of that information in my head. And
yeah, I understand. And maybe, and this is not a side, but just for staff, that's DOJ staff, this is why you need to get this information out to us sooner, because I don't think I got it sooner than later. All these plans, people so you can marinate with it a little bit before we get here, and then we can focus our conversation. This is why I also don't like, and I kind of disagree with us having discussions about the content of stuff. And I'm looking that up too. Not making decisions, not voting, but being able to talk through some of this, even if it's just staff, to be able to just talk through it before we get here. Because really, we should not be having this kind of discussion while we're on here. We really, everything should be laid out so we can get through this. Otherwise, these meetings will not be pretty. So, and we got to get a plan out. We got to let the public know what we're doing. We got to do it. Even if we just put a simple plan together, pick one, we have the authority to change it, to add to it, subtract to it. And so that's why I was confused. We just need to put something up. We have the power to take stuff out and put stuff in. That's how powerful we are. Oops. Now everybody got quiet. I'm sorry. I should have been on that call.
I mean,
maybe that's prepared. A motion and it never got a second, or there was no motion.
There was
No
never a motion.
yeah, yeah. So this is Grills. It seems on the face of it fairly simple and straightforward, but the devil is in the actual details and the logic that went into the final selection of what our topics are. And yes, in fact, we can change and modify them as we go. But I think I was like Member Holder. It was hard for me to keep the different options in my head to understand whether or not we were covering things adequately or things were falling through the cracks. Perhaps a way forward in the service of time is to go back to reconsidering Chairperson Moore's proposal that we can make a motion to vote on it here today, with the understanding that Member Jones Sawyer has presented to us, that we can make amendments later. We will then at that point have her document in front of us. And when we meet again, we can make necessary modifications with the benefit of having had time to let it marinate and time to do comparisons.
I would like to make that motion with only maybe one caveat. We call it the tentative schedule, not the permanent one, but the tentative, and we finalize it at the next meeting. Would that give people comfort?
Do that. I really want to make sure that, I'm respecting the opinions of each task force member. And as a suggestion, would it be helpful if I put the meeting topics in a Word document as opposed to like a PowerPoint presentation, just so that you'll see it all on one page? Would that be helpful at all, or should we just move towards the motion?
Either one is fine. A Word or a PowerPoint is fine for me, because I'm going to end up doing my own little thing with it, creating a grid, just because it's how I do what I do.
No, I mean for the purposes of this meeting right now, like I can quickly transpose the topics from my PowerPoint presentation to a Word document and then share my screen so that you'll see all the topics on one page. That was what I was asking. Member Holder, would that help you at all, or? She's on mute.
Hear you.
Mute.
Holder,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, this
Be
is
the-
Amos.
Yes, Vice Chair Brown. I recognize Member Holder first, then I will come to you. Thank you. Member Holder?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think you need to do a Word document right now. I think this is something that we all have to sort of, digest in our own time and marinate over, and, move things around in our own way. I would suggest that we do get some support from the DOJ in maybe creating a document that shows us where themes are overlapping, you know, what's new, and give us space to add something. I think is to create some kind of spreadsheet for us to help us with this process.
Okay, great. The only clarifying question I have, and that's in relation to Bagley-Keene. So I would like to get some insight from the California DOJ. If we do what Member Holder proposes, I just want to get clarification that that's okay, that's not necessarily considered conducting business outside of a public notice meeting. Coming up with, yeah.
Chairman Moore, this is Sarah Belton. I can speak to that.
Thank you, Ms. Belton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So, of course, Bagley-Keene permits all of the task force members to communicate directly with staff and for staff to compile and synthesize, as we've already discussed earlier today. We did do that in preparation for this meeting, and we will continue to do it for all meetings in the future. And in particular, we work with Chair Moore and Vice Chair Dr. Brown in putting together the agenda and the meeting materials. So yes, to the extent that there is a specific request for a type of document like the spreadsheet that we've heard today, we will do our best to compile that and to circulate it. And of course, the same rule that we've already talked about before applies. Just please do not reply all when we send you all emails or items for consideration.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up question, just because I'm trying to be as diligent as possible. If we do what is proposed, what are the implications of that proposal on our next hearing? So for the next hearing we have, there's no implications that we need to be aware of at this time.
So Chair Moore, my understanding was that there was a motion that was potentially going to be voted on by the task force for a tentative public hearing plan to be adopted, and that the spreadsheet was an additional request that was apart from that motion. If I'm incorrect, I certainly apologize, and the DOJ will take its direction from the task force as to how the task force would like to proceed. The sort of caveat to that is we can't proceed with having a public hearing at the next meeting if a public hearing plan has not been adopted by the task force.
Thanks, that's what I thought. Okay, Dr. Grills, go ahead. Oh, sorry, one moment, Dr. Grills. Vice Chair Brown, excuse me, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My fellow task force members, I go back to my abiding concern. Knowing the political lay of the land, knowing what we're capable of doing as human beings to deliver, considering our schedules, knowing what it means to get people together in a focused way, spending focused time on the task, I still raise the relevant question. What major human needs for us as a people that we ought to be dealing with in the hearing? And number two, that we can come up with a comprehensive, crackerjack, substantive document. And finally, we can develop the pressure points to get the political will to do something. I would invite all of us to read the Coroner Commission report, to read that report that followed the riots in Chicago, Illinois, after that Spanish flu epidemic. Go back, look back, have a Sankofa moment, and gain a sense of history of what has happened to us and what progress we have made, have not made, because we did not move strategically and knew how to navigate this unjust, racist society. And I don't apologize for calling it racist at all, but that's what it is and has been. So I hope that in all of our deliberations, we consider that, what is doable. And remember, Brother Willard Brown had the longest tenure as Speaker of that assembly. Even they changed the rule to get rid of him. But he always said, if you're going to get into the political process, you better know how to count. How to count. And if we're going to be successful, we got to know how to count, and we're going to got to know how to spend focused time on the task and all of these areas that might be considered as basic human needs. And when is it going to come to fruition? Do we have to wait from now to eternity for it to happen? We need to have some success stories without too much delay, or else none of us who are talking here now, will live to see any fruition.
So members of the task force, I have a motion. Can I get a second so we can move forward and get something done?
Assembly member, I will second.
Thank you.
But Dr. Grills did have a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Yes, but before you go to the motion, I just wanted to clarify, what was the topic, the first topic, from your list, Chair Moore? It was it also dealing with the institution of enslavement,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, ma'am. I can.
Okay. And that's
really quickly.
right. And that's meeting number 3 as well for
The DOJ.
right, exactly. So I mean, if we were able to vote on this, your plan as a tentative schedule, we could move forward with the topics that you've identified that really do mirror to some extent the topics that were laid out by the DOJ. So it doesn't mean that if we make this tentative that we can't move forward with our next meeting, but we just need to make sure in our next meeting we put an agenda item in to vote on any modifications to that agenda.
Correct.
Chair Moore. Go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I just have a quick, and this is on kind of the structure that you laid out. I want to ask the thought process behind the 6-month or so gap between meeting 9 and meeting 10. I'm imagining that is the report actually being written, but I that's somewhat of a red flag for me. So I want to get some clarification on that.
Yes, thank you. That's a really great question. In terms of how I planned out my proposal, I just changed up the substantive topics, but the timeline in and of itself, I kept the same from the DOJ's proposal. So still, I think that's a great question. And so I would like C. Wynn or Ms. Gang to come in and clarify the DOJ's reasoning behind that gap.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chair Moore, and thank you so much for your question, Member Montgomery Stepp. The reason is that in order to incorporate all of the materials that are discussed publicly in the public meetings into the written report, we have to do it by fall of 2022. However, we did plan also the timeline so that meeting 9 in fall of 2022 would, again, of course, I would absolutely defer to Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer on the topic, as he's the expert here on legislative process, state level. But our understanding was that the fall is usually when legislators consider new proposals and bills. And so we wanted to present the proposals, have a hearing on the proposals. In the same time, perhaps that meeting would be in Sacramento, so that would get everyone's attention to push a bill forward. Then again, I would defer to Assemblymember Reggie Jones Sawyer. Our understanding is that sometime in late spring, early summer, there would be when people were considering their votes. And if we were to make a presentation of the final report, then that would be another sort of push for rounding up votes. Of course, that gap also takes into the consideration the publication process. And another comment about the publication process, which is that if the members would like these public the public testimonies to be incorporated into the written report, that has to be done alongside, in consideration of the editing process as well, with the understanding that the task force sunsets on July 1, 2023.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I'm not quite sure what the legislature would be looking at that point. I guess that's where I'm missing. Maybe it's just me.
If you want something passed in legislature, you have to get it. You have to get it before a legislator and the legislators to get it done. We just don't take up something on Monday and have it done on Sunday. I mean, it's
understood. But are we putting our final stamp of approval on what is going before?
I think what she's saying is if there's any legislative findings that come out of our research, what the public wants, they want new laws, they want put in place, they want things in the budget, especially the budget. That would be the time that you make those proposals so that it's in the governor's budget come January of 2023. And if we have legislators who want to carry bills that want to change laws, it's in that process so that it can get approved in 2023.
Okay, I thank you for that. And it kind of leads me to my other point, which was the legislative piece to this. And just like in the beginning when we talked about community engagement and being kind of in sync with the task force goals, mandates, sounds like there's additional legislative concerns or things that we have to make sure are in tandem with our timelines and goals. And that for me includes the pathway for proposals, legal pathways, because I don't know much, but what I do know is stuff gets chopped up and as it moves through the system, it gets changed. And so I think maybe that's something that we should discuss, even if it's just as far as timelines. But that's still a concern for me, or at the very least, I would like to know more about it, how we're syncing our work with the legislature.
Yeah, I think that's what Dr. Brown was talking about, making sure we build a groundswell of support so that we can get these budget things and these legislative things off the ground, that we don't start in the middle of 2022 or the end of 2022. We start right now, educating people and bringing them along with this this task force, so that when we make our presentations or we make our final findings, it has the support of a large swath of people. So it become very difficult, not only for them to change whatever we want, but we definitely don't want them to say no, because it's just too many people saying yes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
So there is a motion on the floor. It's been properly moved by Assembly Member Jones Sawyer and seconded by Member Montgomery Stepp that the task force accepts or approves the tentative public hearing schedule, with the caveat that this public hearing schedule that I propose is tentative in respect to not only the substantive topics, but also the timeline as well. That suffices. Is there any discussion on this matter? I did want to note in my presentation, I did have in my proposal overview a section on ROPs or requests for proposals. Since we've talked about my proposal, I don't think I received any feedback per se on this part of the agenda. And so I would like to hear some feedback, if at all, on this part of the proposal for the public hearing schedule. The idea of the task force calling for ROPs from diverse stakeholders before each public hearing, ROPs as it pertains to the next topic that we would discuss at that public hearing. And then we would, yeah, did anyone have any thoughts on that? That is a part
Madam
of
Chair, Madam Chair, please call for the vote before you talk past the yes.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, I will turn it to Ms. Parliamentarian Johnson, who will, Dr. Grills, yes. Grills, you are ready. Dr. Grills, you are on mute. You are ready.
Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the motion be amended. Well, I'd like the motion to be amended to include the request that DOJ staff help to assemble the material in a way that makes it easier for the task force members to do their due diligence on the topics, the timelines, and the meeting agenda.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we will move to a roll call vote. Ms. Belton?
Thank you, Chair Moore. Your vote, please.
Aye.
Chair Moore votes aye. Vice Chair Dr. Brown?
Aye.
Vice Chair Dr. Brown votes aye. Senator Bradford? Dr. Cheryl Grills?
Aye.
Dr. Grills votes aye. Lisa Holder?
Aye.
Lisa Holder votes aye. Assemblymember Jones Sawyer?
Aye.
Assemblymember Jones Sawyer votes aye. Dr. Javon Scott Lewis?
Aye.
Dr. Javon Scott Lewis votes aye. Don Tamaki? Don Tamaki votes aye. Councilmember Monica Montgomery Stepp?
Aye.
Councilmember Monica Montgomery Stepp votes aye. Chair Moore, on the motion, you have 8 task force members voting and 1 task force member not present, and you have 8 aye votes.
Thank you, Ms. Belton. There were 8 aye votes, 0 nays, and 1 member not present. Therefore, the motion carries. And to restate the motion, the task force has decided to implement or accept the public hearing proposal that I presented as a tentative public hearing schedule, with the caveat that it can be amended in terms of the substantive topics and in terms of the timeline, and with the additional caveat that the California Department of Justice will provide administrative support to the task force members so that we can streamline any amendments that we may have to the accepted proposal. Thank you. Okay, so actually we are running very, very early, which is an absolutely amazing thing. The next item in our agenda is actually public comment, which is scheduled to start at 3:30. However, since we're early, can we start?
Member Don Tamaki has comment?
Oh, sorry, I was looking. Go ahead. You are recognized, Tamaki, and you are on mute.
That's why no one's hearing me. It's just a practical matter as we adopt this approach, and especially with respect to 2-day hearings. The sooner we can get dates, so we can block those out in our calendar, I think the better for everybody here. I can't, I know everybody's extremely busy. The other piece of it is, as the Cheryl Grills works on the community engagement, that will also tend to fill up the calendar. And I realize that not all of the task force members may be able to attend all of the community engagement proceedings. We might come up with a way to kind of deploy ourselves. Let's say if it's one in Northern California or Central Valley or Southern California or different other parts of the region, whether urban or rural, we can basically start putting dates up and then commit to those dates. So I think we first start with the public hearing schedule, and I know we can't go too deeply into it because it's still in flux. But and I'm not asking for dates now, but I think the sooner the better because everybody's very deeply busy.
And
Does that make sense?
I just wanted to sort of follow up on your point, John Tamaki. If we're going to adopt a schedule that has 2-day hearings, just as a practical matter, with how busy we all are, that's huge. And so we should think about using one of those days or half a day for listening sessions. And especially if we are going to be in person and moving around, that way we can hit different regions, have 2 days of engagement as a public hearing and a listening session. So I think we should consider, just utilizing that extra time to arrange it in that way.
That makes sense. Just as a point of clarification, for the listening sessions, I think we all know, but not all task force members can be present at the listening sessions because then that becomes a more official meeting that has to comply with Bagley-King standards. So at any given listening session, I believe there can be no more than two task force members present. So that I just wanted to put that out there.
But that is an interesting idea that Member Holder is proposing, that we could look at some of those listening sessions being folded into a formal hearing, dedicating half a day to it. And we could think strategically about what particular bucket might best be covered in that particular way. So I think we can do straight listening sessions where there's no more than 2 of us present, but also consider a portion of a day 2 being a listening session with all of us present. And it may be that the topic or the particular bucket may drive which of those is best to hold on a portion of a day 2. I'd also like to ask for clarification from staff that in terms of Bagley-King, if my interpretation is correct, I can talk with a Member Holder so that we can work through synthesizing what she proposed and what I proposed, and that does not violate Bagley-King. Is that correct?
Chair Moore, this is Sarah Belton. I can speak to that question.
Thank you, Ms. Belton. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Dr. Grills, you are correct. So what we want to avoid is a series of communications which can turn into a meeting if it involves more than a quorum. But if you speak with Member Holder about something and you don't involve any other task force members, or you speak with staff about it, that is totally fine. I think what I've discussed with a number of the task force members is the rule of 3. You hit 3 and we're potentially creating the unofficial subcommittee and we hit issues. So don't violate the rule of 3. Don't sort of use each other to pass on to play telephone. And you're totally fine to communicate amongst yourself.
And then, thank you for that, because you also added another piece, because I'm trying to understand interpretation of Bagley-Keene and what's interpretation and what is actually more open to a broader interpretation. Is it true that under Bagley-Keene there could not be a subcommittee tasked with work? And I'm thinking now ahead to when we're trying to craft the recommendations. It is extremely difficult to do that in a large group. Most things get done in small working groups that are then brought to the larger body to then flesh out and react to. But the interpretation that I'm seeing of Bagley-Keene is much more restrictive than any I've ever seen in any other, government body. So there is no room for a subcommittee under Bagley-Keene that perhaps could have 3 members?
So again, Dr. Grills, if you have 3 members, you would run up against potentially the requirement that you notice and hold a public meeting to discuss the official business of the subcommittee.
But a quorum is 5, correct?
But a quorum is 5 for the task force. But when a subcommittee conducts an official business on behalf of the task force, it can be subject to notice and public transparency requirements under Bagley-Keene. I'm happy to take this back and to look into it more and to provide you with a more fulsome answer, which it seems like would be helpful.
Yes, I think it would be.
Yeah, just a quick question, if possible, could the California DOJ staff provide a distinction between the types of meetings we're holding now versus subcommittees versus advisory committees? Right? Because from my understanding of Bagley-Keene, like subcommittees would require like 1 to 2 members. Advisory committees could be 3 or more, but then as Ms. Belton said, it would require for Bagley-Keene to be adhered to, and then we have the larger meetings that we're doing today. Is that correct? Or would staff?
Chair Moore, this is Sarah Belton, and what I hear you saying is you'd like to know the difference between subcommittees, advisory committees, and the task force as it relates to Bagley-Keene. And so we will do our best to put together a fulsome answer and bring that back to the task force.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Grills, that's fine. Everything's okay on your end? Okay, great. Awesome. Any other questions? But no, if not, again, we're still early. Public hearing, public comment is scheduled to start at 3:30 p.m. And right now it's 2:54 p.m. So is there any way that we could start public comment early and extend public comment, so to speak? But extend public comment, but is that possible?
Mr. Moore, this is Xiyun from the DOJ. Are you asking whether or not we can technologically start public comment early and extend until 4:30?
Yes.
Yes, we can do that. Our staff is ready. Group,
okay.
Would you like to?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask the group. Should we start public comment early? Should we give ourselves maybe a 10-minute break, 5, 10, 15-minute break? What are your thoughts on how we should proceed?
Sorry, Chair Moore, if we announce that public comment would begin at 3:30, I'm a bit concerned about people counting on that and then not being heard, so when you start changing up the schedule and people are adjusting their own personal commitments, I'm wondering if that's a problem.
Yes, I have the same concern. I don't want any of the members of the public to be thrown off. Some members of the public might have been planning for a 3:30 start time.
Yeah.
But however, if we are continuing past 3:30, those who are expecting and anticipating 3:30 don't lose out. And it allows for more people to be able to speak because it was going to be stopped, whether or not people were finished at 4:30, I believe. Right? So this could allow for more people. So if those who are ready to speak and are here, they could start when 3:30 rolls around. We're still here, and people can still continue to get into in line to make comments.
Yes, I hear you as well. We can just go by consensus. We don't have to put this up for a vote. But by consensus, do you all agree that we should start public comment at 3, 30 minutes ahead of the schedule, and extend it until 4:30 if needed? Okay.
I'm okay with that. I think because it says up to 4:30, we should stay until 4:30.
Okay, great. So I'm hearing some yeses, some thumbs ups. Okay, so we will start public comment promptly at 3 p.m. So that's in less than 2 minutes. Okay, I'm sorry. I think we should start at 3:15. It gives the task force members some time to have a bathroom break, and it gives the public to kind of convene themselves. So let's start at 3:15. Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you're on mute. I don't
Were there no public comment earlier than 3:30? Is that why we're waiting? Or
Oh,
was it-
so I made an announcement that instead of starting at 3, we would start at 3:15 just to give task force members a bathroom break and the members of the public to kind of convene themselves. So
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that part. I
no
dashed.
problem.
I made a dash, had dash when I thought it was 2 minutes. So,
Sorry about. Thank you. We'll be starting in 5 minutes.
okay.
We will resume now. It is 3:15 and we will move to public comment. I will turn this over to the staff to proceed. At 4:30 p.m., we will continue the agenda. Staff, you have the floor.
Group, if you're on, I think your audio is muted.
Whose audio?
That's okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are now moving to public comment. Public comment will be for 1 hour. Each individual is limited 2 minutes for public comment today. As you may have heard the task force vote earlier, at the next meeting, there will be 3 minutes for public comment. Today, at the 2-minute mark, your microphone will be turned off and you will not be able to turn yourself back on. We just want to forewarn you that we may not get to everyone for public comment today, but there will be 8 more public meetings, as you may have just heard the task force tentatively agree to. And we welcome everyone in the community to make comments in the future during the meetings and also at future listening sessions. At the end of the meeting, we will post the task force email address and we invite you to submit written comment and testimony via the email address. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Trini, who will now explain the technical side of participating in public comment.
Good afternoon. To participate in public comment, please use the raised hand function. You can find that button on the upper right-hand side of the screen on the sidebar. There is a shape of the hand. Once you click on that, it will prompt a raised hand feature. On our end, we will accept your raised hand, then you will get a notification at the top center of the screen to continue. You will have to click continue, and once you are accepted and brought into the meeting as a presenter, you will be automatically muted. Once it is your turn to comment, you will be unmuted, and will have 2 minutes to speak. At the end of your comment, or at the 2-minute mark, you will be muted and drop back into down to attendee. We will accept the raise hand feature as they come in. Once the person in front of you is done speaking, I will say your name to prompt you and you may begin speaking. Please note that there is a 20-second delay between the attendee and presenter mode, so please keep that in mind as you are being promoted to presenter mode to provide public comment. Public comment will now begin. Harvey Brody, you may now begin speaking. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead, Harvey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank
Hello?
you.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I should start by congratulating the committee or giving you my condolences. It's going to be a tough pull.
Harvey Brody.
Yes.
You may now begin speaking. You have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me? I am speaking. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Harvey.
Okay, great. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah,
So
I wasn't sure whether I should
Harvey, you need to mute. If you have a second screen on, you need to mute that because there's a 20-second delay.
It's going to be a tough pull. Is that still working?
Yes, you can go ahead and make your public comment, please.
You can't hear me?
We can hear you. Please make your
I see.
public comment.
Okay. Well, let me first congratulate the committee, and it's an awesome responsibility and a wonderful opportunity. And I just want at the outset wish you all the best. I've been watching all day, and it's a bit of a slog, but this early phase I think is critical. I'm a professor emeritus retired professor emeritus from UCSF, and for many years have been working in the area of recruitment and both on the faculty level and the student level. And I'm particularly interested in that area of remedies which might involve either combination of education and education as well as access to care. I've noted the comments about culpability that have come up, and I think the University of California needs to be looked at very, very carefully in terms of its clear policies regarding student admissions and faculty appointments and promotion. And so those are things I know something about. And I was told to submit information to your website, which I've done. And I'd just like you to know that if I can be of any assistance in a supportive role to any of you in these areas, I would I would love that opportunity. So again, I wish you well, and good luck with the rest of this meeting.
Thank you, Harvey. Friday Jones, you are now able to comment. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Kansa Jones Muhammad, and I'm known as Friday Jones. I'm the co-chair for the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. I wanted to discuss the role of grassroots organizations in publicizing these hearings to ensure adequate public participation, in particular for the living descendants of U.S. chattel slavery. AB 3121, Section 8301.4D states the task force may enter into contracts for the purpose of conducting research, surveys, preparing reports, performing other activities necessary for the discharge of duties of the task force with state departments, agencies, and other instrumentalities, federal departments, agencies, and private entities. I want to recognize Tammy Mack, KJLH Radio, Stevie Wonder, and Fox Soul for allowing NAASD Los Angeles the opportunity to utilize their platforms as a grassroots organization to publicize today's hearings for the task force. We would be more effective in canvassing areas in Los Angeles with written materials, phone banking, and town halls listening sessions with monetary and administrative support from this body to more meaningfully engage the descendant community in Los Angeles. I also recommend the commission look into the SBA Navigator program, which utilizes hubs and spokes for targeted community engagement. I want to submit experts to be engaged by the task force, including Dr. Sandy Darity and Kirsten Mullen, authors of From Here to Equality, Richard Rothstein, author of Color of Law, Deborah Archer from the New York School of Law, Dr. Shiroki Holly from Culturally Responsive, Lakeisha Martin, the Vice President of the African American Farmers of California. The U.S. Census, I'd like to see a report on immigrant African Caribbean populations, their timelines for entry, exit, and residency in the state of California. This body must hear from the experts that the descendant community knows will add insight, data, and value to this process for our specific benefit. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Burgess, you are now able to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, and task force. I thank you for what it is that you're going to do. Jonathan Burgess here. I stand here and present before you guys as a living descendant of the original pioneer Rufus Burgess that landed in Coloma in 1849. I'd ask that this group look at our family story, considering our great-great-grandfather arrived here before California was part of the Union. And I'd caution the group, while I know it's important that we look at the transatlantic slave trade, and it's important that we educate the other members. A lot of people are aware of that, and just kind of stick to, I'd ask the group that we stick to California, as this is the task force put together for the state of California's role and what it did with slavery. When we look at transatlantic and some other things, they do have federal ramifications. Not to water that down, not to say that it's less, I would ask that California hopefully lead the way and show the federal government what they should be doing. So I want to thank every one of you, and I'd ask that our family story be at least looked into because it's worthy. And I don't know any other living descendants that can say that they were here in direct ties to the gold rush of California in 1849. My name is Jonathan Burgess, and I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Frankel, you are now able to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello. Earth Justice supported passage of AB 3121 last year and is proud to continue supporting the important work of this task force and its partners today. We look forward to working together with each of you, members of the task force, and our partners in the environmental and racial justice movements to continue carrying this work forward. The task force has already begun the important undertaking of gathering evidentiary documentation of the institution of slavery and the brutal legacy it left in the US and its colonies. The harms that this legacy continues to perpetuate on Black communities across the nation manifest themselves in multi-layered and intersectional ways across many sectors. To be done right, the process of determining compensation and eligibility will take considerable time and effort. We look forward to working with all of you and supporting this process as it continues. As Earth Justice attorneys, every day we have the privilege of representing and working in partnership with leaders fighting for racial and environmental justice across the US. Environmental racism is but one feature of the systemic racism that drives shockingly disparate rates of death and disease for Black people. We know that in addition to that fight, Black communities are also resisting other compounding injustices that stem from chattel slavery and its legacy, racist policing in courts, mass incarceration of Black people, disinvestment in education, housing, healthcare, and access to capital. We believe this process is an important, albeit long overdue step toward reckoning with the violent anti-Black racism that has defined much of our history as a nation and as a state. This work aligns with our organizational commitment to support the movement for Black lives and upholds our core values of justice, partnership, inclusion, and equity. We are humbled to stand in solidarity with those leading this work and are eager to move forward in partnership with all of you today. Thank you.
Chris L., it's your turn to speak. You have 2 minutes.
And thank you all for the work that you've been doing today. Hi, my name is Chris Lobson. That's the L. I am a Black American descendant of U.S. slavery living right here in Sacramento, California. And in order for this historic effort to be successful, in my opinion, my community must be engaged. That means informing, involving, consulting, and collaborating with us. It also means being open, responsive, and accountable to us. I want you to create the strongest, best reparations proposals you can, educate the public, and build the support we're going to need to make those proposals real. I also want you to engage my community every step of the way. I strongly, and let me say this strongly, I strongly support the ideas in the community engagement plan that was discussed here, and also the ideas organized by the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, or CJEC, and I want this task force to support those ideas too. And you can support that, and you can do that by creating a community engagement plan that includes those ideas, which it sounds like you already have. Last thing I'll say is thank you to ETM Media for live streaming this entire reparations hearing right now on YouTube and on Facebook. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Jahara Amen, it is now your turn. You have 2 minutes.
Task Force distinguished members. My name is Jahara Aminara Al-Kibalan Ma'at in the sacred Ohlone indigenous land, now known as Oakland, California. I am a life member, past national male co-chair, and West Region representative for our National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, and in COBRA. I thank you all again for agreeing to serve on this extraordinary effort for truth and justice, and to uncover and expose centuries of horrific, often state-sanctioned and state-imposed crimes against people of African ancestry. First, I want to offer my support for our distinguished chairperson, Sister Attorney Camila Mila Moore's tentative proposal for public hearings, and also for community listening sessions. Please post that on the task force website so we can see more details, which we weren't able to capture everything today. We will also be offering suggested experts and scholars from NCOBRA and others in this field for possible presentations to this body. Second, to increase public participation and act in a truly open and democratic manner, I again, as I did last month, encourage the task force to hold all its future meetings and or public hearings on Saturdays. My experience has shown that this would give more of our current and former residents, workers, scholars, students, families, and organizations greater access and opportunities for fuller engagement in this process. Finally, as regards to the budget, I encourage you to do your best within what was initially proposed. However, if it is merited, the task force budget can be and should be revised, including increasing per diem allowances to carry out this monumental assignment and first in the U.S. statewide reparations for African Americans effort. We will have a California state budget between 250
you have
and
reached
300
the
million.
2-minute limit. If you have further comments, please feel free to email us.
Thank you.
Guest Jeb Eddy, it is now your turn. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Jeb, J-E-B, the old Southern name after a Confederate general. I am descended from slave traders in New England. The transatlantic database called slavevoyages.org has my family name in it 5 times, and I am directly related to 2 of the ship captains who brought more than 500 enslaved Africans to this country, particularly South Carolina, between 1797 and 1808. I think you guys are doing great work. I submitted a short text message to the chat box. I don't know who will receive what I sent, but Dr. Darity talks about a portfolio of reparations in the last chapter of his book, From Here to Equality. And I would like to submit the idea that you all consider the word portfolio of reparations as you move forward onto the really tough issues of what kind, how would reparations look for multiple potential eligible receivers in the state of California and elsewhere. So you're off to a great start to tear really, really tough challenges. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to continuing to support you as best I can. Have a good day.
Sharice Cryer, it is now your turn. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. Sharice Cryer, second generation Angelino, descendant of slavery through all 4 paternal and maternal grandparents. This session today is excellent. First, I'm concerned the discussion the commission had earlier about who the stakeholders and community members are for the commission. This bill started in the legislature over a year and a half ago. I'm suggesting that the commission goes back to the organizers groups and individuals who advocated for and amended the bill. There are several attorneys on this commission, and we're looking at statutory interpretation. You always go to the legislative history. I'm asking, please look at the legislative history and the recorded testimony of individuals who advocated for the bill. There's a reason special consideration is given to descendants of American slavery. Also, this committee is supposed to be concerned with fundamental fairness surrounding reparations, historical injustices for those impacted by slavery. In the U.S., reparations has always been for the repayment of lost wages and wealth for those who were chattel slaves in the U.S. This week, Jamaican authorities announced they were drafting a request for the Crown to pay reparations for the transatlantic slave trade. As a descendant of U.S. slavery, I would not be able to make a claim to Jamaican reparations. I would ask that the commission please look at who is eligible. Some on the commission believe all Black people, regardless of ancestry, are eligible for reparations. And this does not align with notions of fundamental fairness given the history of reparations for other groups in the U.S. And I would ask the commission to please clarify if you believe that any Black person should receive reparations in the U.S. Also, the commission should have a narrow focus on the issue of reparations. The U.S. must make atonement of its own history of slavery. In addition, the U.S. institution of slavery is called peculiar because it's unlike any other country. It's simply not realistic, nor will it be effective to try to address every single Black group that has been agreed by this commission. There's going to be pushback from the other side. And
Thank you so much for your comment. You have reached the 2-minute limit. If you have further comments, please feel free to email us.
Oriana, it is now your turn to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please start your public comment.
Okay, yes, hi. So my main concern is, and I'm not sure whether this is going to be addressed or not, is for Black entrepreneurs, you know, for people that actually want to, you know, maybe get those personal loans or get those loans in general. How are you guys going to be addressing that so we can build our own communities? Also, like with not that much Black businesses, I guess, around, especially here in California, or just I can't find them, how is the money just going to be circulated? You know, like that's like the main thing, you know, it's going to be going outside of different communities, and then how can we build, you know, our own community up? So that's just all I have to say. I hope I made sense. I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 plus years, and I'm doing very well, and I know that that's like an important factor in order for us to build our communities. So yes, that's all.
Robert Reed, you are now able to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please start your public comment.
Okay, I just have 2 names that I wanted the commission to consider as far as the public engagement and the outreach. I would like for Antonio Moore to give commentary, as he's contributed a lot of work to the racial wealth gap, and I think that he could be a very good source of information as far as that topic goes, and as far as the just the education portion of the commission. I think much of what we're trying to do as far as this commission is to unlearn a lot of the things that we've come to learn. And so I think that Dr. Jared Ball, he should also be considered as an expert for testimony, because he does a lot of work in the myth of Black buying power. So those are just 2 names that I want to be considered for the commission: Antonio Moore and Dr. Jared Ball. I'm done.
Thank you. Kevin, you are now able to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So first and foremost, I would like to say I would recommend Antonio Moore and Sandy Darity as far as, for them to testify. A lot of the current push for reparations and the energy behind reparations actually came from their work. So it only makes sense that, they're some of the main ones consulted. Also, in the last meeting, it was said that one of the main things for this meeting would be getting everybody on the same page as far as the basics, like as far as reparations for who exactly, not descendants of enslaved people, because that can include other people who are descendants of slaves in other countries, not even just Black Americans or African Americans, descendants of U.S. slavery. That's the specific term. That's actually the term that Sandy Darity uses. If we're not even on the same page about that, then the rest of it's basically going to be another waste of time. As I see Amos Brown raising his hand, the rest of it's going to be a waste of time if we're not at least on the same page about the basics. Reparations for who? If we don't have that, then we're just going in circles. They're going to have people like Amos Brown who are going to include immigration and all kind of other issues and groups. And of course, if you want to undermine reparations, the first thing you're going to do is include other people and groups. And that's the first thing he did, of course. But we have to get on the same page about the basics. If we're not, it's just a waste of time. Anybody who's been pushing reparations and the people who actually brought the energy behind reparations, well, that's the first thing they're going to tell you. Reparations for who? For who? For who? If we don't get on the same page about that, the rest is a waste of time. By the way, that's extremely disrespectful to bring up other groups and other issues when we're talking about reparations for U.S. slavery. Black Americans, descendants of U.S. slaves, are the only
Thank you so much
group
for your comment. You have reached the 2-minute limit. If you have further comments, please feel free to email us.
If anyone else wishes to give public comment, please press the continue button. There are several people in the queue that haven't pressed that button yet.
Just to repeat, Cerise Cryer, Kevin, Michelle Burton. You have to accept our acceptance. Very awkward, I know. It is in the same place where you raised your hand.
There are a couple more in the queue. Christian Bouvier, you are unmuted and able to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Beauvoir, California resident, descendant of slaves. And I want to say how grateful I am doing and know that you have an uphill battle. That you all are the different
Mr. Beauvoir, you're breaking up.
petition. I'm wary of the
Mr. Beauvoir, I'll give you a moment to connect, and I'll go on to the next person. We'll come back to you. Michelle Burton, you are able to speak now. You have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Burton, Chief Strategy Officer for Community Health Councils in South Los Angeles. This is the most exciting day of the month for me. I am your biggest fan. This is my second meeting watching you all. You are just amazing stewards of this work, I just have to say. I know I'm geeking out, but I just want to share that because everything's so somber. I just want to be like, this is so exciting. Every time you guys meet is an accomplishment, and I just don't want to lose sight of that. So thank you. As a LA native, I started my activism at 16 years of age during the LA riots and uprisings. The sustainability and staying power of any reparations policy advanced must have collective support and strength of as many representative groups as possible. We all need to own this historic moment together in order to assure its longevity. No one is free when others are oppressed. We've heard that before. White supremacy has harmed all of us and made our society sick. It is a disease from which we all suffer, and like COVID, is a worldwide pandemic that has been long ignored in service to capitalism and wealth accumulation. When we define community and community engagement, it must be done broadly with restorative justice and those who have suffered the most harm at the center. With that, I certainly agree. I look forward to supporting this work and just want to, again, impart that, my efforts at Community Health Councils, along with our other partners in South LA, is one of community engagement. Would love the opportunity to be a part of those conversations to support this. I'm a 30-year fundraiser and marketer, so for me, I am much more concerned about the staying power of whatever it is that you all recommend that gets passed. It won't be the first, it'll be the very beginning of many changes to come. But in order for it to be sustainable, we need all Californians to be with us on this. We need everyone to be supporting it so that we're not constantly fighting folks to roll it back.
Your comment. You have reached the 2-minute limit. If you have further comments, please feel free to email us.
Serafi, you are now unmuted and have 2 minutes.
Great. Hi, I'm Serafi. I live in Humboldt County, historically Caddo land, and I'm coming at this naively and from ignorance. But I remember the last meeting had a big presentation slide illustrating all the boxes of different departments in California's executive branch. And from my perspective, I would really like to see 2 proposals from each, targeted at each one of those departments in each one of those contexts. To me, that makes a lot of sense as a practical thing. Naively, I would think that a big group of folks that are involved is beneficial, and a large diverse array of folks supporting it. I was imagining hearing about this leading up to it, that it would be watch events, and we would have parties, and people would be anticipating it and contributing it, and it would be everybody's kind of maybe thinking of how could I do my little part, and it's sort of a California wide thing where everybody can get involved. For my thing, I'll be a little bit off the norm and say that following Professor Carol Anderson's identification of the Second Amendment as being used for racism, I'd like to counter that and hope that oppressive efforts to take arms back from Black citizens should be reverted, and the task force should consider boosting gun ownership among descendants of American enslaved people. Thank you, and I'm so excited for this opportunity to participate in something which repairs and restores our legacy of injustice.
Thank you. Chad, you are now unmuted and are able to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon to Madam Chair and members of the task force and all supporting staff. Thank you for your commitment and thoughtfulness in this historically important undertaking. My name is Chad Brown. I am a resident of Los Angeles and an advisory board member of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants in Los Angeles, aka NAASDLA, a member of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, aka CJEC, and I also co-host a monthly online podcast titled Politics in Black, on which I've had the honor and pleasure to speak directly to several of you and discuss your role here and vision as a member of this task force. I, like Dr. Brown, am a native of Jackson, Mississippi. I was raised by my mother and grandmother in the Georgetown neighborhood of Jackson in a home less than 2 miles away from where Medgar Evers was assassinated in 1963. The story of Medgar's murder was a childhood cautionary tale that early on informed my point of view on race relations, and that I was perceived as belonging to an American bottom caste, and everything around me seemed constructed to reinforce that perception. Now I reside in Los Angeles, California, and I can tell you that the racism and systemic dispossession that I witnessed here in California rivals anything that I saw in the Deep South. You have a monumental task ahead of you in that you are not only seeking to redress and restore the Black American California community, but also setting a template and tone for the nation and federal government to finally make good on its promise of economic justice for Black Americans who are the descendants of persons enslaved in the U.S. On behalf of myself, my family, and my ancestors, thank you for your selfless service. I applaud your focus on community engagement, and I very much look forward to the outcomes. Thank you, and you all have a great day.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and try Mr. Beauvoir again. I'm going to unblock him. Mr. Beauvoir, you are unmuted. Please try.
Hello, can folks hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you all. Again, I just wanted to say that in the spirit of non-repetition, I'm wary of the dependence of the DOJ in the task force structure and believe the task force should limit DOJ interactions with community in all forms, especially in communications and outreach or an assessment of value or framing of community comments. We're in discussions about reparations for slavery and its afterlives in this state. We're recognizing the violence that Black people have and continue to experience, and one of the primary perpetrators of that violence is the Department of Justice. And by using them so heavily in this process, we're further growing our investment in systems of policing that brutalize our communities and increasing interaction between our community and policing entities. And I know that there will be a number of trusted community partners who, purely for the understandable reason of potentially contracts being held by the DOJ, won't participate in this process. And at the very least, the task force should limit any direct contact between DOJ and community for these proceedings, and instead seek to find trusted community members to conduct outreach and read and assess community comments. The DOJ shouldn't play any part in a fight for reparations outside of acknowledgement and reparation of their harm. Thank you.
Thank you for being patient. Marcus Champion, you are now unmuted. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcus Champion. I'm a native of Inglewood, California. I'm also a board member of both the National Assembly of Slavery Descendants, Los Angeles, as well as the Coalition of a Just and Equitable California, also known as CJEC. I would like to thank the task force and Chair Moore for this undertaking. This is not easy. It's a lot involved in the process, and I just want to commend you all for stepping into the gap and doing what is necessary to make sure that justice is served. I would ask that the members of this task force consider all forms of reparations. And it's not necessarily because of this conversation today or the first meeting in June, but typically when prominent figures are speaking on reparations these days, they tend to look at it as a more symbolic undertaking and not necessarily looking at the holistic view of reparations, which includes all sorts of forms, including monetary compensation. And so I would also like to ask that you make the community a partner in this. I know a big part of this meeting has been talking about community engagement and outreach. If we examine the Japanese redress as well as Holocaust reparations, you would see that it was really the testimonies of the public, the testimony of the victims, an examination of the history of what actually happened that created the groundswell and the political will to be able to make sure that everything was done properly and done to the fullest extent of what it needed to be done. And so I'd just like to thank you all for letting me speak today. Continue the good work. Keep it up.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to speak, please raise your hand now. I believe that was the last speaker, folks.
Chair Moore, we'll now turn it back to you for concluding comments.
Thank you, staff. We are now on agenda item number 9, which is my closing remarks and adjournment. In terms of closing remarks, I just want to summarize the action items that we went through today. Action item number 1 were my welcome comments and establishing quorum for the beginning of the meeting. Action item number 2, we had a presentation from parliamentarian Dorothea Johnson. I just wanted to thank Parliamentarian Johnson for her invaluable work and insight and assistance she's provided me and the rest of the task force today. And I can speak for the rest of the task force and say we are looking forward to working with you throughout this process. In terms of action item number 3, that was the approval of the minutes, and they were approved as presented. In terms of action item number 4, we had an open discussion of community engagement, and the substantive action item that came out of that discussion was that we would implement member holders and member grills plans for community engagement as blueprints with the idea that they can be amended. In terms of action item 5, we had a discussion and adoption of procedural options for weighing evidence. In terms of Roman 1, which was oral testimony, as a task force, we decided on option 3, incorporating oral testimony into the written report as relevant and posting written testimony on the website. In terms of Roman 2, for written comments, we chose option 1 and 4, which is that the staff would provide a summary digest, making preliminary determinations on its relevance, but the entirety of the written comments will be posted on the AB 3121 website. In terms of Roman 3, public comment, we decided on option 2. The task force will receive public comment and staff will put the digest into our meeting minutes. A motion was passed that public comment for the rest of the hearings will be moved to the beginning of each hearing, and the time limit will be extended from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. In terms of Roman 4, telephone calls to the DOJ, we decided on option 2. All calls will be sent to the task force members through an email form with no preliminary determination on relevance. In terms of Roman 5, in terms of reading materials, we decided on a combination of option 1 and 2, with the caveat of having at least 3 days lead time built in to those options. And with Roman 7, synthesis of evidence, we decided on a combination of options 1 and 2, again, with a significant or sufficient amount of lead time, at least 3 days built into those options. Action 6 was our lunch break. Action 7 was our discussion and adoption of the public hearing schedule. And the substantive action that came out of that discussion was that we would implement my public hearing proposal as a tentative proposal. But the task force members will convene with staff, and the staff will provide administrative support to synthesize any amendments if and when necessary. Action 8, we had public comment. Thank you to the members of the public for your robust and insightful public comment. And then action 9 is my closing remarks. That's all that needs to be stated at this time. We're looking forward to our next public hearing. Thank you again to the task force members for the invaluable work and contributions that you are giving to this space. Thank you to the members of the public again, for those who gave public comment and just for those who were listening. We really appreciate you, and we're looking forward to working with you all as well throughout this process. Without further ado, yes, Vice Chair Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the comprehensive overview of what happened. I want to make it patently clear that my comments regarding immigrations has nothing to do with my being xenophobic or nationalistic. But if we are telling the truth across the board, the U.S. Immigration Department, because it has not been just in determining who would come in and gentrify the communities in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, and in Oakland, that's why there has been the cause of pain and displacement of many of our historic communities. And what we are saying, we ought to have our fair share, while others are deserving of having their fair share. And that's being morally consistent, and we have to tell the truth. If we are talking about righting the wrongs that have been perpetrated against specifically African Americans here in this state of California, north, south, and the central area, all over. That is the truth, that is the story, and I hope that as we go forward as a task force, we document things and we tell the truth and not put anything under the rug.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We will discuss in depth. At this time, without further ado, the task force meeting is adjourned. Thank you.